What follows is the fabled lost episode with Joe Pack. Lost under a pile of Clarkson Pfeiffer episodes, now it's been found and you'll have to listen to it. Tune in next week for a much better episode. For now, though, courage.
Well, I love the talk about the jerseys, and of course, if we were talking about Canada, where I'm from, I'd be talking about the confusing, to say the least, Canada jerseys from this year. But it was it's great. These ever since I started listening to American Wish, that's the kind of hockey talk that I always look for. That something where you're talking about relevant stuff, but it's got these nice little tangents you can go on as well.
I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Yeah.
Honestly, you took it verbatim out of my head. So I grew up listening to AM radio. But this is not pre-internet, but it's certainly pre-modern internet. And so I just listened to the local radio stations. And I love the hosts who, at the very least, tried to have a thoughtful conversation, even if it was a rhetorical conversation. And I really appreciated the ones who filtered out the crazy callers pretty well. With the exception of some of them. Like there's this one guy who I think actually did die from giving himself a heart attack because he would get so upset every time the Yankees traded his favorite minor league star.
Oh no. You
have to have a few screws loose to die from a self-imposed heart attack like that. But that's neither here nor there. I should probably talk to Wish if he knows what happened to me, because we listen to the same guys. Anyway, the point is that I'm not interested in like what Mike and Mike do on ESPN. I'm not interested in or what Dan Le Batard does, where it's just the super topics. It's the topics that grab the most amount of people. I'm interested in, I don't care about the topicalness of a given topic. I care about the kind of conversation you can have from it.
Sure, and with podcasts, you're kind of breaking off into all these little slivers. So, people aren't probably coming to my podcast or Born to Puck to get the super topics. They're looking, for, much like American Wyshynski does, to take something and go deeper than you've known before, or make it more personal than ever. You know what I mean? And sort of refine it in a way that no one else would. I mean, I don't go to Yahoo for the brand. I go there for Wyshynski.
Yeah, brand loyalty isn't really a thing anymore. It's whether or not it performs the function that you're interested in.
That's right. And to your point before about having callers on, having callers on sports radio is almost like the precursor to reading your mentions on Twitter. I mean, it's just just anger and here's what I have to say, but who cares what this caller has to say for 30 seconds? I mean, it's like going out in the street and just grabbing someone by the shirt and say, what do you have to say about the Leafs? I mean, you know what I mean?
You just gave me an idea of something I really want to do. The thing that I really want to do right now is go get either a really good GoPro or just a buddy who will hold a camera while I go up to random people and try and talk to them as though they are like an AM talk show host, and just give them like 15 or 20 seconds of rambling and just see how they respond.
Yeah. Yeah, here's your chance, and then try and be surprised when someone, has a problem with the David Clarkson contract or something, like.
Oh yeah, totally. But he came home.
Right.
He came home. Nobody comes home to Toronto anymore.
He's dark-haired and blue-eyed. Come on, give him a chance.
He's not Aryan.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We hated the last one. Sundin was a bum.
Yeah. He's never even been to Quebec. He's fine.
He didn't even know how to spell Ontario. Oh my God.
His name has an heir to the throne of Maple Leafs history. Give him a chance. And actually, I could talk for half an hour about Clarkson, because I might be the only person in Toronto that I know that would actually defend the guy and the contract. But that's probably a conversation for a whole half of an episode probably.
Well, give me the preview at least on the contract, because look, when it comes to the person as a person, yeah, I'm really flexible when it comes to justifying that sort of thing. Really, as long as you're not a bad person, I don't really care what kind of person you are. It just doesn't affect me. That's where I draw the line. But, the contract is pretty terrible. But let's hear the defense. I'm interested.
Okay. First of all, the contract, I think the cost of the contract could conceivably be no big deal if the cap indeed is going up by quite a bit. Also, you can always trade him to the Oilers. You always know that the Oilers would take that guy in a snap. The other reason why I don't mind it is because I think he's an easily tradable asset, because the name David Clarkson evokes all these ideas about what a hockey player is. And because it's hard to pin down exactly what he does, I think teams can be persuaded by the idea of David Clarkson rather than the numbers, right? Well, if he comes to our team, then he's going to provide all these intangibles that Leaf fans talked about, But the problem with him now is that he's living his own dream, right? He grew up in Toronto and now he plays for the Leafs. He idolized Wendell Clark and his name is David Clarkson. I mean, this guy has everything to live up to. So I think he's his own worst enemy, but I do believe that he can settle down and just play a simple game and be good for the Leafs. But I think because of the size of the contract, it implies that he needs to be more valuable to the team than a second or third liner. And I would be fine as a Leafs fan if he was just a contributing second or third liner who did his thing. He doesn't have to be Wendell Clark. Let me just put it that way. And if the cap is going to go up, I don't mind the $5 million or whatever it is.
I can dig it. I buy it, and it really puts him into perspective. Your opening reasoning was very creative, and I appreciate that. I really do. Sincerely. And he sounds perfect for anybody who has ever acquired Dustin Penner.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah, so he's perfect out in Calgary.
Or Dustin Byfuglien, for that matter, if we're talking about Dustins. The idea of him is very powerful, like a Scott Hartnell type. The idea of a player like that would entice a team, especially a team like the Oilers. And if it's not the Oilers somewhere down the line, there's going to be a team someday that thinks they need a guy like that. If he really doesn't work out for the Leafs, I don't think that would be a difficult contract to trade necessarily.
As a New Yorker, I've seen a lot of guys come to New York, whether they're a New Yorker or not, it doesn't matter. And particularly in their first year, they're trying too hard to live up to the contract, or at least the brand.
Yeah.
And, they're an embarrassment. And then once they settle down, once they get all those jitters out, and unfortunately that usually takes a full season, but once that is out of the way, they settle right into whomever they are. And they go on and have a great career. I've literally seen Alex Rodriguez do it and Roger Clemens do it, and meanwhile guys like Allen Houston rises into the stardom of being a New Yorker, a New York star, and with $100 million contract. And for some guys it just takes a year. It takes a year to get over the whirlwind of it. But as a player, Clarkson needs to figure out how to do one of two things better than most people on the planet. He needs to figure out how to use his size to his advantage, the same way Lucic has figured it out, or he needs to figure out how to be a sniper in a similar mold to a Ginla. And I know, invoking the name of Ginla is a lofty goal. He doesn't need to be 100% a Ginla. He needs to be 75% a Ginla.
Mm-hmm.
And figure out how to create space for himself and how to use his body to do that. He's a large individual who's able to put a lot of muscle behind anything that he wants to do. I would hate to see him waste it the same way I've seen Brian Boyle waste it.
Yep. Or Brian Bickle, not that he's been wasted, but Brian Bickle has not had a year that he expected after signing a contract that arguably been a tad expensive considering his record. Yeah.
Certainly, although I'll defend Bickle for this particular season in that he's been battling injuries. So,
oh, sure.
I know a lot of them have been lower body injuries, and I don't know if you've ever hurt your foot or your knee, but it could be as much of a mental game as it is a physical game when you have an injured joint like that. Really, what kind of life do you have if you have a busted knee?
Oh, sure. And I think Clarkson hasn't really dealt with injuries too much, but I think it's entirely mental for him in terms of, the results so far this year. The other thing is, particularly because he's in Toronto, but even if he wasn't in Toronto, it's so easy to pile on Clarkson in the first year of his contract when he's not doing well. Obviously. Yeah. I can't defend his play so far. Like what I said to you before about why I think it could work out is my faith in him in the future tense. But there's no way I'm defending what he's done, but therefore, because it's so easy to pile on him, I'm hesitant to get on that train. Like just as much as it is so easy to pile on Toronto Maple Leafs for the way they're playing now. Again, I can't defend it. To just pile on and say, see, I told you so, it's just too easy. Maybe I just have that journalistic mind of looking for, or playing a little devil's advocate and being like, well, what's the more challenging way of looking at it? How can I get out of my comfort zone and not just simply say, well, I told you so, the Leafs, were inevitably going to fall, or I told you so, that Clarkson contract wasn't going to work out. I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, the season hasn't ended, the Leafs could make the playoffs, and Clarkson's contract hasn't ended, and it's impossible to say yet that it was a bad contract.
I couldn't have put it any better myself. I would also argue that the length of his contract's absurd, but
I think it is absurd for a player of that type. I think it's just a product of the fact that he was the most enticing player on the free agent market at that time this summer. And everyone is getting suckered into 7 and 8 year deals now, given the new state of the salary cap and everything. I believe it's the longest contract given out by either Burke or Nonis since Burke.
You're probably right. I mean, it's right. If it's not, it's got to be like top 3. Kessel got a longer one.
And Kessel and Phaneuf, those were signed after the Clarkson deal. At the time, I believe it was the longest that they'd signed. Now they traded for Van Riemsdyk, who had 5 years remaining, but I don't believe they'd signed anyone to longer than that.
I believe you're correct. The only other one that comes to mind might have been Komisarek, but that, I don't think that was that long.
It was like 3 or 4.
I'm on Cap Geek right now. Let's find the answer. Yeah, it was 5.
That was a sticking point with Brad Richards at the time that Burke said he would refuse to sign a long-term contract of that magnitude. It was Nonis this time around signing Clarkson. So you could tell that, he was trying to put his fingerprint on the team a little bit.
As a Rangers fan, I applaud Brian Burke for his principles in not signing Brad Richards to an 11-year contract.
Yeah, no kidding.
And don't get me wrong, dude. I haven't really disliked Brad Richards as a Ranger. Look, the price tag, when a guy has real name cachet plus all the silverware that he does, you sort of, and they're coming New York, you expect the price tag to be high. Term or length.
Right, exactly.
It shouldn't be both. Especially if you're not going to the Hall of Fame.
I can't blame any of the teams that tried to sign him at the time, because those last few years in Dallas, I mean, he was magic. He really was. He had a resurgence after having a bit of a dip there between then and Tampa Bay, and he was even on my fantasy hockey team there for a couple of years, and he was just money. He was there. Game in and game out, he was playing point on the power play. I mean, he was the absolute go-to guy on the Stars.
Certainly was, and I've gotten to see how his legs had begun to betray him, and then his confidence. But oh man, could you imagine if this year's Jamie Benn was a member of any of those Stars teams?
Well, he was. He was.
I know
he
Ben was there,
a rookie at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, now.
It was Brad Richards and James Neal there for a while. The two of them were quite the tandem in Dallas for a time, and again, the two of them were just the absolute keys on that team, and they were on every power play, and they were running. I don't think they made the playoffs during that time, but they had a couple of times when they were.
No, they fell just short. If they had one of those years, if they had won their final game, they were in.
Yep.
Fun fact, in 99-2000, as a member of the Rimouski Oceanic, who I grew up with a buddy who made the team but never played for them. He had a 3-point-a-game average.
Wow. Brad Richards you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I can believe it.
Yeah, but in any league to have that kind of average after 63 games, that's just...
Oh yeah, and the guy's got a Conn Smythe to his name. I mean, it's hard to doubt him. Did you see, and I don't know if you'd catch it down there, but James Duthie of TSN had an interview with John Tortorella at the beginning of the year, and he asked him about his relationship with Brad Richards and if he thought it had been damaged, particularly with the benching of Richards in Game 7 against Boston.
I didn't catch it. Tell me.
No, it's absolutely worth your time. It's at first Tortorella, keeps his cool exterior, and he's like, no, not really. And I think Duthie either pauses or prompts him a little bit more, and Tortorella is actually like, you know what? Yes, and he goes into this spiel about what it meant to him to have damaged his relationship with Brad Richards, and it was almost like he was looking into the horizon of his own retirement from hockey and saying, at the end of the line with this job, all you have left is relationships, and the regret was palpable in his eyes talking about Brad Richards. And
I think I got a couple of links to it here on Google. So when we're done, I'll check it out. John is probably in the upper echelon of general and hockey intelligence within the game. I think that this is all emotional for him, and that he's able to figure out the difference between what he portrays, how he's portrayed, within the media and then how to treat his players and his staff. But I think that what fuels him is not intelligence, but it's just whatever emotions he conjures up.
Sure. And there's a real battle going on in hockey right now between an emotional approach versus a more analytical approach, and I don't think either are wrong. You
need both, because one extreme, the analytical, you come as robotic, and nobody wants to be involved with people who seem inhumane or even worse, non-human.
Right.
And the emotional is the other kind of inhumanity or non-human, or it's animalistic.
Exactly, and I think the people who are wrong are the ones who say that it's one or the other, or who tell the other side that they are completely wrong. And
it turns out in life you need a little bit of a lot of things. It's weird.
About advanced analytics is the fact that that it feels as though that side is telling the other side you're wrong, and how could you not revise the way you've always thought? I mean, the funny thing is, when it comes to everyday life, I'm on the side of science. I mean, it makes so much sense to me. I want to, get the old dogs to learn new tricks, and I want to push that. But when it comes to hockey, I mean, this game it's a construct. It's not real life. It's a game. We make up our own rules for it. The fact that someone might walk in and say a scientific approach is the way to go, it should have always been this way, it should always be this way in the future, and how could you have ever thought this way in the past? It's barbaric. And telling old dogs to learn new tricks in the game of hockey, I think is really, really presumptuous. And again, not to say that it's one way or the other. I think you have to strike that balance. But I think that's why there's the backlash is the analytics side is really pushy. And of course, a guy like Tortorella is gonna get defensive. Of course, a guy like Randy Carlyle is gonna get defensive when that kind of thing is pushed on them. You know what I mean?
Totally.
The stakes are not that high. It's a game. Whereas, someone trying to convince the government that global warming is happening, I don't care if the old dogs don't like it, because I think the stakes are that much higher. But it's a hockey game, so to try and push the old dogs like that, I think it's really a waste of energy, you know.
Again, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
I had a professor once in college who, he's Canadian, and this was an environmental class, so I got to talk both with him, and he would describe to me, you know, when you want to talk to me about hockey, you're gonna get the passion, but the passion, it's kind of like a kid. The kid's passion doesn't even consider real world implications. It just wants to go and indulge in the passion. But when you want to talk to me about the environment, I'm just as passionate. But the difference is that I understand the stakes, I understand the consequences, and I understand that my decisions and my non-decisions are all important. And so I'm furious with trying to get the answers right.
Yeah.
And even beyond, you know, the word selection, the amount of extra words that goes on to the difference, even though they're both passionate, is remarkable. I sometimes wonder if hockey wouldn't be one of the first things to go in an environmentally savvy world.
Something to go if it was unsustainable.
Yeah.
Well, and sports in general. I mean, look at what the NFL is going through right now. How much longer can you play a sport without either completely changing it or trying to completely change the public perception of it?
Well, I do have a bit of an answer for that, and it's that they have to sustain the grassroots. If the grassroots choose another sport, there it goes. And there's plenty of sports and other activities for people to choose from. You know, the fact that we have 4 sports in this country, and I guess 5 activities if you want to count racing. I mean, I don't like counting racing, but it is there. We could have that many professional athletes be able to make real livings and beyond in this country, or in our countries combined, is just remarkable. That these people can just play games or race for a living, and that the general public will spend enough money and time on it to make it sustainable. It's absolutely remarkable. You'd think that at some point somebody would go, wait, come on, it's just a game. Let's focus on real issues.
Right.
And they don't!
Yeah, exactly. Those same people might just move on to something else that that they go on to deconstruct, you know.
I wonder if it's not a cultural response to most of human existence where it's been absurdly difficult all of the time, relentlessly. And now that we're in this period, I mean, comparatively speaking, golden period of affluence, which I know is not ubiquitous. I'm fully aware that like 40% of the planet lives in abject poverty, but that percentage used to be a hell of a lot higher.
The awareness of the rest of the world is a lot higher now than in years past in terms of the rest of the world's problems, certainly.
Has to be, right?
I mean, the information is there. The willingness to be aware is a different story, but the opportunity to be aware is there.
Well, I wonder if celebrity culture will always be. If there will ever come a time where celebrity culture morphs into something more about political issues or humanitarian issues, scientific or biological issues, where people care a hell of a lot more about that as opposed to what Miley Cyrus did in her music video.
That being said, if we continue to have sports, there's at least going to be that kind of celebrity, you know. And
true,
I would always be a proponent for sports and games because I think I would almost go as far as to say it's a necessary part of
certainly society
cultures. I mean, any culture you go and visit, you're going to see some kind of recreation, some kind of downtime that people have. Sport used to settle disputes, games to settle disputes, but mostly as a kind of recreational tool, so that we're not always on Twitter harping about the world's problems and going to our jobs. I think it's very important. That's why I spend so much time in sports myself is the importance of games and of play. But, through spending so much time with sport, I think we learn a lot more about ourselves than we even realize. We talk a lot about players' contracts and cap geek and stuff like that, but beyond that, I'm talking about Clarkson and him, being part of his own myth, like the myth of the Maple Leafs. I think sports is storytelling, and that's storytelling at the very least will again always be part of any culture out there, and sports and games go hand in hand with the narratives and reflecting back on who we are at the time.
So I'm curious, what's your hockey beginning?
Oh, well, just very simply, my dad, his whole family grew up in Toronto, so we've been longtime Toronto people, played hockey, all through my childhood and into my teens, had a lot of other interests along the way. I did an undergrad in fine arts, and actually I'm now, believe it or not, I'm in school. I just started a grad program this month in sports journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what I'm going for, and podcasting, radio, broadcast, writing. It's everything and anything that I want to do, that I want to try. So the last year I've been doing the blog, the podcast, sort of in preparation for this, and I'm serious about it and excited and looking forward to a lot of opportunities. Actually, next week I'm going to get a chance to do a scrum interview with Elliot Friedman. So I'm just doing a bit. Yeah. He's coming into the class. Very fortunate to have all of my instructors be people who are working in the business, and he's coming in as a guest, and we're going to get a chance to ask him some questions.
Well, you're going to have to take really great notes.
Yeah.
You're going to have to talk to Jake and I about this, because this just sounds, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. So cool.
I know, I couldn't believe it. I knew there were going to be some guests. I didn't know I was going to be as fortunate as being able to talk to Elliot. But another one of my instructors is Shai Davidi. He's a writer for the Toronto Blue Jays. Another guy who works at TSN as a producer, Mike Gentili. Malcolm Kelly is the guy who runs it. So they've had
Malcolm.
Yeah, he's a CBC writer.
I feel like I've run into him.
So I knew there were going to be some guests, but it looks like I'm going to be getting a lot of cool opportunities this year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, there's being a jock, there's being a sports fan, but I'm really interested in stuff like the Merrick versus Wyshynski podcast, where it's storytelling. And look at how often they're navel gazing. I mean, sometimes it can be maybe exhausting to the average fan, or
today's episode after.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, look, I took advantage of it because Michael apparently is from Long Island like I am, and I sent him a link to the first episode of Born to Puck, and I told him to start at 38 minutes so you could hear when I was heckling Zdeno Chara at the rink that he referenced today on the show.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't get anything back from him, but that's not the point. It's just like I didn't enjoy the episode, but I enjoyed the networking opportunity.
Yeah, sure. And I can't even count now the amount of times that I've made connections or been inspired by something on the show. I mean, the podcast is almost now my first and primary source of, if not news, at least insight and sort of center for making connections and pretty much knowing that you're going to meet interesting people, through the show. So that's the route I'd like to take. If I could be a Jeff Merrick, I think I'd be happy.
Yeah, certainly. I've run into all these really pretty girls through the show in one format or another, and I keep hoping to get a date with them. It hasn't worked out yet, but all of this is just an elaborate ruse to.
Yeah, exactly. There should almost be a Merrick versus Wyshynski Facebook site by now, right? Trademark, by the way, trademark.
Yeah, but I bet you the NBSW dating app.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's the couple who met.
Yeah. I met
right, and they're actually in first place by a long shot in the fantasy league.
Oh, are you in it?
Yeah, I think I'm in like 5th place or something right now, but
that's cool.
But yeah, apparently they met, and on their second date they found out that they both listened to the show.
That's so darn cool, man. It really is. I'm in one of the Face Off Hockey Show podcast leagues. He has 3. I'm in the Liut, which I thought was the last name of one of the guys, because they don't refer to each other by their last name; they say their first name.
Okay.
But apparently it's a reference to an old NHLer. As well as I'm in one of the Broad Street Hockey website, we call it Fantasy Hockey Leagues, and like it's really cool. I haven't been able to use those for networking for whatever reason. The guys don't like to communicate.
Sure, and you know what? I'm not surprised going into journalism that you're going to meet some prickly people, some even antisocial people. I mean, that was one of my biggest concerns getting into it. Is my background is things like fine arts, is things like education, teaching. Is getting into journalism just going into a pool of egos, and am I going to like that? But hopefully there's a place for me, you know. And again, like going back to this show and all the other little slivers of hockey media out there now that's different, that isn't necessarily part of a brand, is that, and you can start to believe that different types of personalities can carve out a little place for themselves. Like, you know, Jeff Merrick is not someone that I would put into the same group as a Leahy or
even a Wyshynski. I mean, he's
even that. I mean, you can almost see Wyshynski softening over the years.
Yeah.
With Jeff Merrick, that if you'd gone back in time 3 years ago and he'd done a podcast with someone else, that he might have even gotten more cynical, more obnoxious, or more prickly. But he has this older, like, Canadian brother type, you know, in Jeff Merrick, who really kind of opening his eyes, you can see in his perspectives and things like that. Jeff
Merrick is everybody's mentor, whether you realize it or not.
Exactly.
I sent him an email a couple days ago asking for some advice to cut down on the filler words, you know, uhs and ands and shit like that.
Sure.
You know, the way that he wrote back, it was so personal, and it's just him being him. But It was so personal, and it was also insightful. I mean, he says, you know, the best, there's no real tip or trick, but being organized going into whatever it is you're going to talk about helps a lot, as well as next time you're by yourself, start talking about something. If you're in the car, turn off the radio. If you're in your den, turn off the TV and start talking, and you will start to pick up what your triggers are.
Sure.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant.
That I don't think I've sent him an email before, but that's great to know that he's receptive to that kind of thing.
So I've been wanting to do a podcast since high school. I don't know how much of a baseball fan you are, but if you are, do you remember when MLB used to hold, I think it was Seth and The Bone? That was the name of the show. It was basically a live podcast. Seth and The Bone after school hours. I thought it was the coolest thing ever that these guys were doing a radio show over the internet. And if I wasn't around, because I was usually playing sports, if I wasn't around, I can log into iTunes and download the entire show and listen to it later. So since then, I mean, I'm going on basically 10 years of wanting to do this. I've been trying to figure out how to do it, and I finally just figured out how to do it. And it's not that complicated. Yeah. It's stupidly uncomplicated. Yeah. But I asked Jeff for some advice on I threw him a shotgun blast of questions. And the best advice that he gave me was, the most important thing that you do is A, keep doing it, B, make it about something that you're passionate about, and C, make it about something that you're going to continually want to learn about. And D, just be yourself. That's often the best part about any particular podcast, that these people are just being themselves.
Exactly. Not to diminish his advice, but you can see the difference between even Wyshynski and Merrick, where Wyshynski almost sometimes seems unsure of himself. At other times he's very comfortable being himself, but you can see when he doubts himself or when he acknowledges negative comments and things like that. And Jeff is just like Bruce Lee, like water over stone. You know what I mean? Like yeah. Everything slides off his back. Someone of his age is so comfortable with themselves, and it's natural for young people like us to have all these doubts and say, where do I fit on the spectrum? Sports, reporting, podcasting, anything like that. It's certainly difficult to get started. And in my podcasts, we had our struggles when I listened back, because, there's rambling, there's not being aware of your voice and what it sounds like. There's, not staying on topic or not having, not like, I don't know if we went out and made our show particularly unique. I think the conversation is interesting, but why would someone go to my podcast as opposed to someone else? But again, going back to brands versus people, I go to that podcast, Merrick and Wyshynski, because of the people, not necessarily because I know the structure of their show or what they're going to talk about, although I assume they're going to talk about what's going on that day. But I also know that half the show or more could be easily about just them, who they are, them being themselves, them being natural, and there's something about that that's very attractive. But no, again, being younger, it's very difficult to get started and feel comfortable. But he's right, and we're probably gonna know much more how right he is, when we get a bit older. But if you can try to adapt or adopt that mentality sooner than later, I think it's to your advantage.
Well, we're really lucky. We're really lucky that we're in 2014, because we're going to be able to do whatever it is that we want to do. And we don't have to have a big financial investment in order to do it. We can show it we have instant connections to the people that we look up to, as well as the people that we want to work with. And we can just go do our thing and not worry about really anything. We can only worry about whatever goals that we have set for ourselves, but we could do a podcast every day for the rest of our lives and not tell anybody about it if that's what we want to do, or we just quietly post and whoever comes along. But even 10 years ago, this would have been such a hassle just to do our own thing, and we're going to get to learn about ourselves by going through the motions of whatever it is that we want to do, and we're going to get to create our own niche. And many people I would argue, are going to want to go to the mainstream niche. And that's fine. It certainly pays very well, if nothing else. And then others are going to want to try and carve out the thing that they want to do and make whatever money that they can off of it. And that's fine as well. We're so lucky to be in this particular position, to have options wide open.
Exactly, and I think even particularly when it comes to hockey.
Oh yeah,
I feel like the doors are wide open now for
getting in on the ground level.
Different types of coverage, because there's so many established ways of covering the game, and then there's all these new little subsects of ways to cover the game, and my God, is it a sport that needs more of a sense of humor, more self-reflection? I don't know, less
it needs to relax. I asked Wyshynski and the other two guests at Hockey Night in Manhattan last week a question. I asked them, why is Don Cherry tolerated?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer I got, which was from the author of Mark Howell's autobiography, I feel bad. I spoke to him. I feel bad I can't remember his name. But in any event.
Yeah, I know the book you're talking about, though, yeah.
In any event, he said, people in Canada just have a thicker skin. That's also why when you watch European television, things are more graphic or a bit more risque by American standards. People just able to understand that it's a joke, or it's just a talking point, or I'm just exploring a point of view, and that it shouldn't be taken so seriously, and we should just indulge in the joke or the conversation and let it float on after we're done.
Exactly. And most of us are 3 beers deep or at a bar or with friends and Coach's Corner is on in the background. I mean, that's a conversation I love to have too, is about Don Cherry, because, going back to, my problem with how easy it is, to pile on something that's so obvious. I mean, obviously, Don Cherry has his issues, but.
Yeah, he's a bigot.
But you like, as a Canadian, you understand where it's coming from. It's not that you're justifying it, but you understand that it's like talking to your grandfather. You know what I mean? And Don Cherry really has some great insight into the game of hockey. I don't ask him for political advice. I don't ask him for his opinions on gender or race. He gives it to me whether I like it or not, but it doesn't bother me because there are fathers out there, there are grandfathers out there, who are equally bigoted in Canada. It somehow doesn't bother me because, he's not our prime minister. He gets a few minutes on TV once a week, and he does have something to say about hockey, and I can appreciate that. And like you said, I'm in on the joke. It's kind of a joke.
And so the word or the title in this particular case that you are describing around is perspective. And
yes.
And your response indicates that you understand that that's key. And as an American, we very easily lose it or have a very difficult time finding it. Whichever depends on if you want to be pessimistic or optimistic towards us Americans. Excuse me.
Well, the funny thing is, you're not the first person from New York that I've done a podcast with. I met a couple other guys who started a podcast, almost by chance, and it's been very interesting to talk to Americans about hockey because I don't get a lot of opportunities to do that.
New York is the third largest state in the union. Who else have you spoken to?
A couple of guys who do, a very, very casual hockey podcast. It's mostly about fantasy hockey, and it's called NHL Hits, named after the old video game.
That was such a great game.
Yeah, exactly. So literally, these guys they're not even like particularly nuanced hockey people. Like, hockey is almost new to them. It was very interesting to talk to them.
Oh!
Yeah, so not to say that anyone from New York is new to hockey at all, but
no, that's
these
fine.
particular guys, it's almost like they were into fantasy football, and through that they got into fantasy hockey like a few years ago.
That's cool. I gotta check these guys out. I've been
NHL Hits
since I could walk. Is that Hits with an S or a T or a Z?
It should be Z because it's named after the game, but it's definitely on iTunes.
Alright, I'll look it up when we're done. I've been playing hockey since I could walk, man. I really do love everything about the game. I even love the fighting. I don't love all of the fighting, but I do love that it's there. I love the differences that hockey portrays that sports don't. Like, I love it. I think the best example of this, though, is in baseball, is that they have two different sets of rules for the leagues.
Yeah.
And I love that there's something so distinct that besides the way the game is played, or is tallied, I love that hockey has its own set of oddball rules. They're really turn into chaos.
Totally. And things that have been carried over from 110 years ago, and things that are new rules like hybrid icing, which are brand new this year. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that at least Canadians are constantly interested in revising it, in molding it, even though they kind of want it to stay the same. You know what I mean? Like, and hockey is our baseball for you, So we inherently identify with the game. We think about ourselves through the game. So it's never, I don't think it's ever going away. Maybe in the current incarnation of professional sports, it might have its rise and fall, but, I don't think we'll ever stop, identifying with with the sport. And that's why it's always changing, is because people change. People in Canada change.
Joe, I am so happy I met you, albeit digitally. I really am. This is the kind of conversation I really enjoy. It's a little bit of navel gazing, but it's also a lot of expanding the conversation and sharing a point of view. And that's really what I'm going for. I'm trying to learn. Jeff says that he's trying to figure out what the other person knows that perhaps he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And like he said today, I still don't, capital U, understand the game of hockey. And that's exciting, right?
It honestly could not be more exciting. I suppose it could be. I'm pretty young yet.
Are you,
how old are you? I turned 26 a month ago.
Yeah, I'm 27, turning 28 this year.
Alright, so what's it like going back to school in the late 20s? Because it sounds dreadful.
It certainly felt dreadful in the couple of weeks leading up to it. I was scared shitless. Am I doing the right thing? Am I spending too much money? Am I right for the job? You know, am I going to fit in as a journalist, like I said, with all these egos and this 24-hour work cycle? But once I got in, it's the most confident I felt in a long time. In high school, university, there's a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of social games and crap that fills your mind, that distracts you from what you're doing. And I'm here now because I want to be. You know, I'm participating in every class. I'm trying to put it into words, but it just feels like I'm in the right place, you know. And I still don't know if it's gonna lead me anywhere, but I don't want to stop learning about this kind of thing. And journalism, you know, I may not necessarily be a beat reporter. I may not necessarily be something traditional, but want to be involved in something where it's all about ideas, thinking, pushing yourself, and constantly learning about the game of hockey. So yeah, more confident than I've ever been. I did the podcast for the last year, but I mean, I had to self-motivate. I didn't have deadlines. Hello? You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm also working on not interrupting people.
Yeah, no, it sounded like my phone died. Trying to self-motivate, working a job I didn't like, it was a scary thing, and some days I'd be confident and some days not. So I think giving myself deadlines and pushing myself every day to do something new has been exciting, to say the least.
I want to say all those words someday soon. I really do. I need to finish my undergrad degree. It was journalism. I just need to go and fucking bite that goddamn bullet and do it.
Is that what your undergrad was? Journalism?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I actually started as environmental engineer.
Wow.
Turns out you need a really strong grasp of physics and chemistry in order to do that job. Just what I don't have.
Either of those?
I never even took bio in high school.
Well, I'm gonna blow your mind in telling you that I've been a sports fan my whole life, but I'm actually pretty proficient at math, but not physics and chemistry by any means.
Well, that sounds opportunistic because I really understand things conceptually. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily understand how to do the mechanics of them. So when I'm reading Corsi numbers, or I'm reading stuff Dello writes, I understand the core concept of what he's talking about, but the numbers don't always mean something to me until I kind of figure out where not the midpoint, like the threshold is for bad and good, which is a bad way of putting it in and of itself. But you know how in Corsi, like 1,000 is sort of the threshold of whether or not somebody's having a lucky or an unlucky season?
Yeah, and I have to admit I don't know even a lot about Corsi, but I agree. Like in conceptually, I can understand it. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you like where the niches in hockey that really strike your interest, because the ones that really strike my interest are that lie more within the mathematical ranges. But I'm also interested in some of the more technical aspects of. I'm really interested in the line changing patterns for teams, and not just timing wise, but also in relation to other people being on the ice. And I'm particularly interested for guys who play high attrition rate positions like Dan Girardi and Josh Georges, who are high shot blockers. What their attrition rate is like is fascinating to me because it dawned on me. Well, you know what? It didn't dawn on me. It got said to me. One of my best buddies, Chris, said, they're really like running backs from football. They're going to have, the best of them are going to have 3 to 7 years of excellence and then just disappear. That's the best. They're not going to be guys like Andrei Markov, who can carve out a dozen years of excellence. The human body just can't do that. And while there will certainly be people who buck that trend, the longer you study that particular attrition rate, the more rare the people who buck the trend will become.
Sure, of course.
And so, how are these people being used to acquire all that attrition on their body? That's what I'm interested in. Because it's not enough just to say, well, Dan Girardi was in John Tortorella's system and he played, and he had a lot of defensive zone starts and he saw the most penalty killing time. It's not enough just to say that, because when you want to talk to me about non-special teams time, that's at least 60 to 75% of his time on ice every night. So how's that majority being used? It matters. And there's no study being done. Well, there are studies being done on it, but they're touching on it. They're not focusing on it.
Sure.
Niches that I'm really interested in is shot location and how that equals shot quality, because there has to be a line where Marian Gaborik's shot quality depreciates and Steven Stamkos's remains the same.
Yep.
I think a lot of that has to do because of their bodies. Marian Gaborik is about 5'10", 175 pounds, and he's a guy who really maxes out his potential, which is great. Once you get beyond the dot, he depreciates really quickly because he's not a shooter for hardness, he's a shooter for accuracy. And you really can't really snipe with velocity is what I was trying to say. But Stamkos can. Stamkos can do both.
Sure, and Stamkos is obviously such a unique athlete that he's able to do that. Yeah, and and in terms of what I would be interested in covering is undergrad was in cultural studies, fine arts and cultural studies. So, and I mentioned to you about storytelling before. So, I mean, I would take something like, does John Tortorella or Alain Vigneault now and Gunsather know, what they've got in Dan Girardi that he's like a running back, that he might be around that he might have his best years over the course of 3 to 7 years. And how you're saying, like, how do they use them? I would ask, how are they abusing that? Like, from the human side of the story. To what degree are hockey players used as mercenaries? And to what degree are hockey teams like family? Like, does Gunsather take care of his family, or does he use up his resources, get rid of them, and then get new resources?
I have an answer for you about that, and he treats it as family, and you see evidence in this through guys like Sandis Ozolinsh when he was a Ranger and Theo Fleury when he was a Ranger. Just to name the first two that come to my head. But the current poster boys for doing this are the Carolina Hurricanes.
Oh yeah, I mean they've had return coaches, return players. Chad LaRose is somebody who's been with the organization since he was practically a kid. And so as much as I've been a sports fan, I've throughout my life I've almost as equally been interested in storytelling, in theater, in education, in psychology. So I'd always like to take a sport and put it in terms that are kind of universal and compelling to read like a story. So, I mean, if I could go into more detail about what I'm interested in doing, but I think ultimately, because I've had all these other interests, I've had so many different types of friends. So if I can make sports, or particularly hockey, interesting to someone who's not a hockey fan, then I've done my job. You know, like I've recommended the Merrick vs. Wyshynski podcast to people who aren't hockey fanatics, and sure, there's going to be times when they're not interested in the detail that they go into, you know, about things like Bun Cook, but you're gonna listen to a couple of people who live the game and tell stories, and Merrick and Wyshynski are this perfect combination of theater kid, hockey analytic, history buff, and storytellers. And this is even for me as a Canadian living and breathing hockey every day, this is kind of a new thing that you've got a couple of guys who are kind of broadening the scope of why hockey is interesting. I love going as deep as like what you're talking about, is some of the details and the mechanics and the concepts, and then also scaling way back and saying, what is the bigger picture here and why is it interesting? You know, why is it interesting to someone who isn't necessarily a hockey fan or even a sports fan? What is the story here? What is the news story? And what's the narrative? What kind of theater is going on here, you know?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really am, especially on the psychological aspect of things.
And that's something that sports fans just absolutely take for granted most of the time, is the burden on the athlete, and it's easily dismissed as, well, they make a lot of money.
We led off basically with talking about this angle with David Clarkson.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's why I'm willing to defend the guy, because money and prominence will mean dog shit if your career goes into the gutter, if you don't live up to your contract, if you can't sustain your quality of life or with your family because you're on the road all the time. These guys can be a mess. It doesn't matter how much money they make. Who was it? Derek Sanderson was a guy with the Boston Bruins who made more money than he needed by going to the WHA. You know, he pissed it all away. He ended up waking up in Central Park and that kind of shit, being in a drunken stupor, and what good is that? And someone, some asshole on the street or calls into sports radio would say, Derek Sanderson, he's got enough money, Mm-hmm. Or, I'd give anything to be as popular as Derek Sanderson. Mm-hmm. Life isn't so bad for someone like that. And sometimes being on top of the world can be the worst thing for somebody,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I watched Theo Fleury's documentary, and that was the secondary plot beyond, after the molestation, which sure. Which I can't even imagine. Thankfully, I suppose, but boy, you just hit the nail right on the head. And I bet you the flip side is Roberto Luongo's experience. He is a family man. I don't know if he has kids, but I do know he has a wife, and she definitely, I guess I don't really know this, but I'm presuming that she definitely was his backbone throughout the last 3 years of bullshit that he had to go through.
Yeah, and you can tell that guy has a spine. My God. Speaking of, hockey needing to relax, I am the biggest Roberto Luongo fan, for the character that he's shown throughout all of this. Mm-hmm. I mean, a great team doesn't quite win a Stanley Cup. Boo-hoo. Like, that's the problem the Vancouver Canucks fans have, that they weren't quite good enough. That's the crisis. Mm-hmm. That's the crisis that they face, was that they didn't, that they came within a single goal or two from winning the Stanley Cup. That was their big problem. Man, oh man, if that's something to riot over, then an absolute shake-up of perspective. And if you're throwing a guy like Luongo under the bus, a guy with that much character and personality, then then fuck all this shit that like for all these reasons that we're following sports, because he is a treasure that should be appreciated a lot more in that city, and particularly in hockey. I think a lot of people are on Roberto Luongo's side by now, but I mean, he kind
of lucked into it because so Schneider got traded, and I was at the Prudential Center when that happened. That was
really, eh?
Yeah,
wow.
that was a really cool moment. I had just gotten done pissing myself when I made eye contact with Claude Lemieux, who is I really don't scare easily. But, and he didn't do anything to me. We just locked eyes, and he's a genuinely frightful looking person. He also looks like a sweetheart, but his head is disproportionately large. His eyes are disproportionately beady and piercing and blue. And when he smiles, you see a disproportionate amount of teeth and wrinkles in the face.
Yeah, sure.
And then when he shook my hand, it was proportionately fearsome and strong. But I did get to tell him that when I was a kid, even though I was a Rangers fan, I wanted to play just like him when he was a Devil. So he seemed to appreciate that. In any event, about Luongo, and I'll tell you about what it was like to be at the draft when I'm done. Just ask if I don't recall to go into it. About a month ago, I had discovered Chris Kluwe, the punter or now ex-punter for the Minnesota Vikings over the last 7 or so seasons, about the way that he stands up for the LBGT community. And I discovered, do you know who this is?
Chris Kluwe, I don't believe so.
Alright. I gotta send you the letters that he wrote because I can't really encapsulate him sufficiently, but what I will say is that the way in which he defends his point of view and attacks the opposition is with humor and facts in the same sort of way a really smart comedian does it. I don't know if you've ever listened to George Carlin in his heyday. Okay, so imagine that kind of veracity, but without the cursing and the excess amount of lewdness.
Sure.
And I've never been a guy that really wants other players' jerseys. I had a hand-me-down Messier circa 94. I don't know what happened to it, but like I was happy to accept it, but like I never really wanted somebody else on the back. Chris Kluwe was the guy that said, I want his jersey.
Wow, that's great.
It is, thank you. And Roberto Luongo, because of in particular the way he's handled this mess, is another person whose jersey that I want. I don't even necessarily want to wear their jerseys around, but I want their jersey as a testament to the support of that kind of person.
Like framing a picture, you know.
Yeah. My buddy's got me a Tiki Barber jersey right at the end of his career, which was great. You know, that's when Tiki Barber was a wonderful human being, we thought. And then all his post-career bullshit, and it's just, like, you really need to go to that level for me to not be happy to bring you up in conversation or to see you on TV. You need to be an objectively bad person. I've been writing down a list of people's jerseys that I want, and also the kind of jersey that I want, like which version of the jersey. And Luongo is literally the second name on there.
Yeah, no, and I completely understand that because it's a person who's kind of at this point transcending sports. I mean, maybe people in other sports don't know the name Roberto Luongo, but they should. And again, it's a story that you can relate to whether you're a hockey fan or a football fan or a non-sports fan. It's someone, and again, whose money and place in the world won't help him when he has those times of feeling useless, of feeling used or abused, and of getting all this unnecessary flack for being, you know, a gold medal winning goaltender who got 3 shutouts in the Stanley Cup final and didn't quite win a Stanley Cup. I mean, shit. I wish that was the Toronto Maple Leafs problem. I wish the Leafs problem was Roberto Luongo. if he's a problem, then
It almost was. That's the irony.
I know. Exactly.
Joe, I'm sorry to cut this off suddenly. I got a buddy who is demanding that we watch the Rangers together, and they're on in 20 minutes.
Hey, no problem, and I got homework to do, so and Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope we can talk again soon. Good luck with school if you decide to go that route, because like I said, it's really scary. But I think, especially at this age, having some years under my belt after being out of it, definitely feel much more confident and in the right place. And that's the first time I've had that feeling in quite a long time. So I say go for it.
All right, folks, that was Joe Pack. You can find him at Joe Pack on Twitter and on his blog, upperbodyinquiry.com. You can find me at Matt Riegler and Jake at Jacob_Born on Twitter. You can email us at borntopuck@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and remember to chirp what you love.